I put the salad on the table and was about to sit down when my mother-in-law grimaced and said dismissively, "Servants don't eat with the family." I looked her straight in the eye and replied, "Good to know, because it is the maids who own this resort. You should have seen her face." The sun was almost touching the horizon line, painting the sky above Baragovaya Gavan in shades of red gold. I wiped my sweaty forehead with the back of my hand and glanced at my watch. Less than an hour before my guests arrived, or rather, my relatives, and even more precisely, my mother-in-law Claudette, who never hid her disappointment that her only son Lyle had married a girl as ordinary as I. "Wren, the wine has arrived," Freddie, one of the oldest employees at the resort, said as he appeared in the doorway. "Could you ask Larissa to prepare a bottle of Chardonnay from 2015? And that Pinot Noir we talked about. Claudette Mercer appreciates good wine." Of course, he nodded and left. I went back to the lists in my notebook. Over the past 3 months, I had gotten used to making notes all the time. Names of employees, cocktail recipes, lists of suppliers, technical problems that needed immediate resolution. It helped me not to get lost in the whirlwind of information that came at me after I unexpectedly inherited Baragovaya Gavan. To this day, I still haven't gotten used to the idea that I own a 5-star resort on the coast. My father's lawyer read the will exactly 3 months ago, when I was still trying to process the fact that Harrison Tanner, a man I hadn't seen since I was 5 years old, had passed away. And then it turned out that he had left me the resort. It still felt like I was playing a part in someone else's story. The phone vibrated on the table. "Lyle, we'll be there in 20 minutes. Mom insisted we stop at Carmichael Winery." I groaned. Of course, Claudette had decided to stop at the winery to pick up a few bottles, as if the stock I had specially ordered might not have been refined enough for her taste. I quickly went up to my room to change. My work clothes, jeans, and a shirt were definitely not up to the standards of meeting Claudette Mercer. Looking at the clock, I realized that even if I hurried, I wouldn't have time to take a shower. I'd have to settle for a change of clothes and a quick makeup. In the mirror, I saw a tired woman with her brown hair in a messy bun. The dark circles under her eyes betrayed sleepless nights spent poring over documents and reconstruction estimates. I quickly washed my face, applied some foundation, mascara, and lip gloss. Then I pulled on a gray dress, which, fortunately, was elegant enough for dinner, but not too formal. Mrs. Mercer, Silas, the resort manager, knocked on the door. "The guests have arrived." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I took another look at my reflection and went to meet the guests. As I walked down the wide staircase of the main building, I noticed Claudette critically examining the lobby. Her pale face with perfectly styled gray hair was a frozen mask of restrained disapproval. "Wren, darling!" She held out her arms, but her eyes remained cold. "What a interesting building. Claudette? Lyle? I'm glad you could make it." I hugged my mother-in-law, feeling her tense posture, and then turned to my husband. Lyle looked tired. His blonde hair was a little tousled, and his eyes behind his thin-rimmed glasses were tired. He kissed me gently on the cheek. "It's really beautiful here, Wren," he said sincerely. "Of course, there's a lot that needs updating," Claudette immediately interjected, running her finger over the surface of the antique table in the lobby. "The old furniture, the decorations. We are gradually renovating," I replied, trying to remain calm. "But some of our guests appreciate the retro charm. The resort has a history, and we want to preserve its authenticity." Claudette breathed, with a look on her face that made it clear she thought that was an excuse for the lack of funding. "Dinner's ready," I ignored her remark. "Shall we go to the small dining room?" I led them down a hallway decorated with old black and white photographs of the resort. Claudette cast critical glances around, but Lyle seemed genuinely interested. "How old is the resort?" he asked, pausing at one of the photos. "Almost 80, I replied. "My father bought it 25 years ago when Coastal Harbor was on the verge of bankruptcy and completely revived it." Right around the time he left you and your mother, Lyle added quietly. I pressed my lips together, not wanting to bring it up in front of Claudette. The information that Lyle's mother had about my difficult childhood was already more than enough for her to make humiliating remarks. The small dining room was the coziest room in the main building, with panoramic windows overlooking the ocean and an elegant but not pretentious interior. I asked Larissa to set the table with the finest dishes and light the candles. Oh, candles are so nice, Claudette said with an indulgent smile. I clenched my teeth, but didn't say anything. Lyle gave me a sympathetic look. Claudette brought over a couple of bottles from Carmichael, but I think we'll save those for tomorrow. It's not bad, Claudette agreed, but I'd look into the new wineries in the West Valley if I were you, Wren. They're on the rise right now. I'll definitely consider it, I replied. Dinner began with appetizers, salmon tartare, prepared by our chef Marcus. I was relieved to note that even Claudette seemed to be pleased with the quality of the dish. Where did you find such a chef? She asked, dabbing her lips with a napkin. Marcus worked here when my father was still here, I replied. He stayed on when I took over. Oh, so he already knew you? Claudette raised an eyebrow. No, I shook my head. I've never been here before. This is the first time I've ever visited the place at all. It's amazing that your father left you all this, considering you two didn't communicate, Claudette said, her voice tinged with suspicion. Harrison Tanner was a very successful businessman. I'm surprised he didn't have any immediate heirs. Mom, Lyle gave her a warning look. We've had this conversation. I'm just expressing surprise, dear. Claudette smiled a sweet smile. You said yourself that Wren never talked about her father. Because I didn't have anything to say. I met her gaze. He left when I was 5. All I knew was his name. The awkward pause was interrupted by Larissa's appearance with the main course, baked sea bass with vegetables. I stood up to help her, even though I knew she could do it perfectly well on her own. I just needed an excuse to leave the table for a while. Is everything okay, Wren? Larissa asked quietly, when we were in the passageway leading to the kitchen. Yeah, everything's fine, I lied. My mother-in-law is just, well, you know. She nodded sympathetically. The sea bass was great. Marcus did his best. Tell him I appreciate it. When I returned to the table, I noticed that Claudette and Lyle were arguing quietly about something. Is everything okay? I asked as I sat down. Of course, dear, Claudette smiled. Lyle was just telling me how his father almost invested in this resort 15 years ago. Then we decided it was too risky. I looked at Lyle in surprise. You never mentioned this. He shrugged. I didn't realize it was the same resort until we got the news of your inheritance. It's a small world, Claudette said with a tight smile. And so is the business community in this region. I brought the salad, the last course before dessert, and placed it on the table. It was a simple salad of arugula, pear, and gorgonzola, one of my favorites. I picked up a serving and was about to sit down when Claudette suddenly grimaced, as if at something unpleasant. The servants don't eat with the family, she said in a dismissive tone, looking at my plate. Time seemed to slow down. I felt my cheeks flush and my chest feel heavy. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the shocked expression on Lyle's face and the tense posture of Larissa, who was still in the room. I slowly looked up and looked directly into Claudette's eyes. Good to know, I replied calmly, although my insides were boiling. Claudette froze, her mouth slightly open. She looked as if I had just dumped a glass of ice water on her head. Her normally pale face turned bright red, and her eyes widened in shock. I didn't mean it, she mumbled, casting a panicked look at Lyle. I think that's what you meant, Claudette. I continued to look her in the eye. You always thought I wasn't good enough for your son. Not rich enough, not sophisticated enough, not… Mercer… Wren! Lyle began, but I held up a hand to stop him. No, Lyle. I've put up with her condescending comments for years. But this is my home. It's just a misunderstanding. Claudette laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood. I just wanted to say that you work so hard, running around. You should relax and enjoy your status as the owner. Please don't. I shook my head. I know perfectly well what you think of me, and it used to bother me. But now I realize that your opinion doesn't matter. The rest of the dinner passed in tense silence. Lyle tried several times to start a neutral conversation, but it quickly died down. Claudette hardly touched her food, only nervously twirled her wedding ring on her finger. When Larissa brought dessert, a cheesecake with wild berries, Claudette suddenly announced that she had a headache. I think I'm going to go get some rest, she said, standing up. Lyle, will you walk me to my room? Lyle looked at me, then at his mother, and nodded. Yes, of course. They went out, leaving me alone in the dining room. I sat there, feeling my hands shaking, either from adrenaline or resentment. Or both. When Lyle returned, I had already moved into my office, a small room in the back of the main building that used to belong to my father. Wren? He knocked gently on the door. Can I come in? Yes, I answered, not looking up from my papers. Lyle came in and sat down in the chair across from me. I want to apologize for Mom, he said quietly. I looked up. And what you didn't say, Lyle, was that acceptable? He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. I know. I should have intervened. It all happened so fast. This isn't the first time she's insulted me. I felt my voice tremble. And you always keep quiet. You always find an excuse. She didn't mean it. She's just being old-fashioned. It's her way of showing concern. Wren. No, Lyle. I'm done. I don't want to live my life trying to please a woman who despises me. I don't want to feel worthless every time she walks into the room. I stopped, trying to control myself. My hands were still shaking, and I hid them under the table. What do you want me to do? Lyle asked, sounding genuinely confused. I want you to be on my side, I replied. Just once. A vivid memory from my early childhood. A summer day, the kitchen table, and my mother sitting with her hands over her face. Her shoulders shake with quiet sobs. I'm 5, and I don't understand why my dad doesn't come home anymore. I put my small palm on her knee and ask her, Mommy, does Daddy still love us? Bethany Tanner wipes away her tears, picks me up, and says, Wren, sometimes adults make choices that have nothing to do with love. That day, for the first time, I felt that there are things in life that cannot be fixed with a simple, I'm sorry. Dad chose a different life. Without us. He never came to our house again. Bethany was a music teacher at an elementary school, but after Harrison left, her salary alone was not enough. She started taking extra lessons in the evenings and working as a waitress on weekends. Watching her come home late at night, her eyes red from fatigue, but finding the strength to check my homework, I learned the most important thing. Never give up. Wren, no one in this world is going to give you anything for nothing, my mother would often say as we sat at our small kitchen table on weekends. Our house in the suburbs was modest, 2 bedrooms, a small living room, a cramped kitchen. But Bethany did her best to create a sense of home. She sewed curtains from old dresses, painted furniture found at garage sales, and grew flowers in the garden. We were not poor, but every cent counted. When I turned 12, I started helping my neighbor Mrs. Winston take care of her garden. She didn't pay me much, but for me, this money was the first step towards independence. On my 15th birthday, I got my first real job as a waitress at the local Blue Cup coffee shop. Just remember, your studies come first, my mother said when I shared the good news. I listened to her. Even while working 20 hours a week at a coffee shop, I maintained high grades and eventually received a partial scholarship to a state university. But it still wasn't enough. Tuition, books, and living expenses were expensive. So I continued to work, sometimes picking up extra shifts at the campus bar, In my third year, I decided to specialize in hotel management. Something about this industry attracted me. Maybe the idea of creating spaces where people can feel at home even when they are away from home, or just the practical skills I already had from working in the service industry. It sounds a lot like you, my mom said, when I told her about my choice. You've always been able to create comfort out of nothing. In my final year, we were invited to a regional conference on hotel management. My term paper on integrating local cultural elements into boutique hotel design was honored, and I was to present it on a panel discussion. What if no one takes me seriously? I nervously tried on the only business suit I could afford, a simple black jacket and skirt I had bought on sale. Ren, you've earned your place there, my mom replied. Let your work do the talking, not your clothes. The panel discussion was less intimidating than I expected. After the presentation, a young man in an expensive suit and a friendly smile approached me. Your idea of using local crafts in hotel design is brilliant, he said, extending his hand. Lyle Mercer, I represent Mercer Investments. We specialize in hotel projects. Lyle didn't look like your typical investor. His thin-rimmed glasses hid sincere blue eyes, and his manner of speaking lacked the arrogance of many in the industry. We talked for almost an hour before being interrupted by the organizer, who was about to close the conference room. Perhaps we could continue our conversation over dinner, Lyle suggested. That night we stayed at the restaurant until closing time. Lyle talked about his family, his father, who founded an investment company, his mother, who ran a charity, and his dream of using family resources to support innovative hospitality projects. And your family? He asked. Just me and my mom, I replied. She's a music teacher. And your father? He left when I was 5, I shrugged, trying to show that it didn't matter. I barely remember him. Lyle didn't dwell on the subject, and I was grateful for that. Instead, we talked about ideas, dreams, projects. It was the first time I had met someone who saw potential in what seemed like mere fantasies to others. A month after the conference, Lyle invited me to spend a weekend in New York, where his company was opening a new boutique hotel. I couldn't afford the trip, but he insisted on paying all the expenses as a professional exchange. It's not a date, he said with a smile. It's a research expedition. But, of course, it was a date, and the beginning of a relationship that developed at breakneck speed. 6 months later, Lyle introduced me to his parents. Gerald Mercer was reserved but polite. Claudette was Claudette. Oh, so you're a student? She asked with a subtle smile. How interesting. And your father? My mother is a music teacher, I answered, deliberately ignoring the question about my father. How nice, Claudette said, in a tone that made it clear she didn't think it was nice or sufficient. After dinner, Lyle apologized for his mother. She's just concerned, he explained. Her own family lost everything in the '80s recession, and now she's obsessed with financial stability. Are you saying she thinks I'm after your money? I asked bluntly. No, not really. Lyle seemed confused. It's just, for her, marriage is also a business arrangement. She married my father partly for that reason. But you're not her, I said. No. He took my hands in his. I'm in love with you, Ren Tanner. Your intelligence, your passion, your strength. And I don't care what my mother thinks. We got engaged a year later. It was a small wedding. I insisted on it, despite Claudette's suggestion that we organize a proper celebration at a prestigious hotel with 100 guests, most of whom would be Mercer business associates. This is our day, I told Lyle, not a corporate event. We got married in a botanical garden with 50 guests and a simple reception. Claudette didn't hide her disappointment, but Gerald seemed to approve of our choice. A wise decision, he said, raising his glass at our wedding. The money you save is better invested in your future. After the wedding, we moved to an apartment in the city. Lyle continued to work for his father's company, and I got a job as an assistant manager at a small boutique hotel called Chestnut Alley. The job was challenging but exciting. I was responsible for daily operations, guest services, and working with local suppliers. 2 years later, I was promoted to manager when the previous manager retired. Claudette, of course, felt that this job was beneath my new position as Mercer's wife. "You could join my charity," she suggested during one of our family dinners. "We always need smart people to organize events." "Thanks, Claudette, but I love my job," I replied. "And I'm good at it." "Of course, dear," she smiled tightly. I didn't tell her that for me, there was nothing more prestigious than a job that I had gotten through my own efforts, not through family connections. Our life with Lyle was comfortable. He was attentive, kind, and supportive of my career. We traveled, visited theaters, and enjoyed the small pleasures of city life. The only constant shadow was Claudette, who never missed an opportunity to remind me that I didn't belong in their circle. Not with her words, she was too sophisticated for that, but with her looks, her intonations, her subtle sighs. That all changed on a sunny Tuesday when I received a call from a strange man who introduced himself as Harrison Tanner's lawyer. "I'm very sorry to inform you of the death of your father, Ms. Tanner. I mean, Mrs. Mercer," he said. "Mr. Tanner died last week of a heart attack." I sat at my desk, feeling strangely numb. How can you grieve for someone you barely know? "I'm sorry to hear that," I finally said, "but I don't understand why you're calling me." "Mr. Tanner left you an inheritance," the lawyer explained. "Quite a substantial one. Could we meet to go over the details of the will?" I agreed to the meeting more out of curiosity than expectation. Perhaps my father had left me some memento or a small amount of money to ease my conscience. But when the lawyer, Mr. Holloway, began to read the will, I realized that it was something much more. "To my daughter, Wren Tanner Mercer, I leave my main asset, the Shore Harbor Resort, with all its surrounding land, buildings, and businesses," Mr. Holloway read. "There is also a letter that Mr. Tanner asked me to give to you personally." With trembling hands, I took the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in a confident handwriting. "Wren, when you read this, I will be gone. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness or understanding. I have abandoned you and your mother, and no explanation can justify that. But I want you to know that not a single day went by that I didn't think about you. Baragovaya Gavin is a place I created from the ruins, just as I tried to rebuild my life after I destroyed our family. I watched you from afar, your success at school, university, your career. You have become a strong, intelligent woman without my help, and I am immensely proud of you. I'm not asking you to keep the resort. You can sell it if you want to. But if you decide to keep it, know that this place has a soul. Perhaps by taking care of it, you will be able to better understand a part of me that I have never had the courage to show you in person. With love, I don't deserve to express, your father, Harrison." I stayed in Mr. Holloway's office for another hour, learning details about the resort, the financial statements, the staff. The Shore Harbor was a 5-star establishment on the coast, about 3 hours from the city. Founded in the 40s of the last century, the resort went through periods of prosperity and decline until Harrison purchased it 25 years ago and revived it. When I got home, Lyle was waiting for me. I told him everything, showed him the letter. "That's incredible, Wren," he said, hugging me. "You deserve this." "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Part of me wants to just sell everything and forget. But the other part of me," he finished softly, "wants to know more about your father. And I've never run a whole resort. It's a whole other level." "But you dream about it." Lyle knew me better than I knew myself sometimes. He was right. Despite my shock and mixed feelings about my father, I couldn't deny that the prospect of running the coastal harbor excited me. It was a challenge, an opportunity to prove to myself and everyone else what I was worth. The following week, Lyle and I went to check out the resort. It was a stunning complex, a colonial-style main building surrounded by cottages, with a private beach, swimming pools, restaurants, and a spa. The staff greeted me with respect. although I could see the curiosity and slight anxiety in their eyes. They didn't know what to expect from Harrison's daughter, who had suddenly appeared in their lives. Over the next few days, I met with department heads, studied financial reports, and toured every corner of the resort. Silas Grant, a manager who had worked with Harrison for more than 20 years, became my guide and later my first ally. "Your father was demanding but fair," he told me. "He created a family here of people who were not related by blood but shared his vision. When we got back to the city, I had already made a decision. I want to try it," I told Lyle. "At least for a year. If it doesn't work out, we can always sell it." "I'm with you," he replied. "I can work remotely most of the time and come to you on weekends." The next step was to inform the Mercer family. Gerald took the news with interest, asking about financial prospects and offering to help with legal issues. Claudette was less enthusiastic. "Running a resort?" She raised an eyebrow. "Wren, darling, it's not like your little hotel. It's a huge responsibility." "I know, Claudette," I replied. "Of course, if you feel that way," she sighed. "I just don't want you to be disappointed when you realize how difficult it is." Despite her skepticism, I decided to take what seemed like the most logical step: invite the Mercers to visit the resort so they could see for themselves what I was dealing with. Maybe then Claudette would realize that I wasn't just playing the businesswoman, but making a serious decision about my future. "Come back in 3 months," I suggested during our next meeting. "By then, I'll have settled in, and will be able to show you the real Beregovaya Gavan." Claudette agreed with the same condescending smile with which she always accepted my initiatives. But this time, I was determined to prove to her that I deserved respect, that I could be a worthy heir not only to my father, but also to the Mercer name. Well, 3 months was enough time to understand the scale of the task ahead of me, but not enough time to fully master all the intricacies of running a resort. And now, after the disastrous dinner, I found myself in a situation where I would have to defend my right to be here, my right to be called the owner of Shore Harbor, to the woman who had always thought I wasn't good enough for her family. The morning after that disastrous dinner was surprisingly sunny. I woke up in my room alone. Lyle had decided to spend the night in one of the guest rooms, saying we both needed space to cool off. Maybe he was right, but his absence felt like another small betrayal. At breakfast in the small dining room, the atmosphere was tense. Claudette sat with her back straight, elegantly sipping her tea from a china cup, as if nothing had happened last night. "Good morning, Wren," she said with measured politeness. "I hope you slept well." "I did, thank you," I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Lyle looked from me to his mother, clearly unsure of how to diffuse the situation. "I thought we could tour the resort today," he suggested. "I want to see what changes Wren has made in the last 3 months." "That's a great idea." Claudette set her cup on the saucer, with a subtle clink. "Maybe I can even give you some advice." And that said it all. Instead of apologizing for her behavior yesterday, Claudette decided to extend her stay at the resort, ostensibly to help me. I saw Lyle breathe a sigh of relief, thinking the crisis was over. But I knew better. The war had just begun. After breakfast, I took them for a walk around the territory. Beregovaya Gavan is spread over 10 hectares of coastal land, with a main building, 20 separate luxury cottages, 3 restaurants, a spa, and a private beach. Despite the early hour, the staff was already hard at work, with gardeners tending to the immaculate lawns, maids cleaning the rooms, and chefs preparing the dinner meals. "We've started the renovation of the north wing," I explained as we passed a section of the main building that was cordoned off with construction tape. "That's quite an ambitious deadline," Claudette said. "Usually this kind of work takes much longer, especially if you take into account the bureaucratic procedures, permits." "I've already obtained all the necessary permits," I replied, "and I've hired a reliable contractor who specializes in hotel renovations." "And how much does it cost?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Before I could answer, Silas Grant, the resort's manager, approached us. A tall man with graying hair and a tanned face, he exuded the calm confidence of a man who knows his business. "Good morning, Mrs. Mercer." He nodded to me, then turned to Lyle and Claudette. "It's good to see our owner in good company." "I'm Silas Grant, manager of the Shore Harbor." "Claudette Mercer." My mother-in-law held out her hand, as if she expected Silas to kiss it. "Lyle's mother. I was just telling Wren that the North Wing is in need of some serious renovation." "Oh, actually, the project is already well underway," Silas replied with a polite smile. "Wren has come up with a wonderful renovation plan that preserves the historic character of the building while modernizing all the amenities. Harrison would be impressed." Claudette froze for a moment, clearly not expecting support from the staff. "How long had you known Harrison?" she asked, quickly changing tactics. "Over 20 years," Silas replied. "Together, we transformed this place from a run-down resort to a gem of the coast." "How interesting." Claudette turned to me. "And what did Silas tell you about your father, Wren?" "A lot of secrets must have been revealed." We're gradually learning about each other. I exchanged a look with Silas. Silas has been incredibly helpful in all aspects of running the resort. "I'm just helping Wren get up to speed," he replied modestly. "She's already introduced several innovations that have improved our performance." Claudette pressed her lips together slightly, but said nothing more. We continued our rounds, and with each step, I could feel her irritation building. Especially when the staff addressed me with respect, looking for confirmation or approval. After lunch, Lyle went to his room to work, even on vacation. He couldn't completely detach himself from his responsibilities at the investment firm. I headed to my office, hoping to review new vendor proposals, but Claudette decided to join me. "I thought I could be of service," she said, walking in uninvited. "After all, I have a lot of experience running a charity." "Thanks, Claudette, but I just have some routine paperwork to do," I replied, trying to be polite. "Oh, I love paperwork." She sat down in the chair across from my desk. "The devil is in the details in every contract, as Gerald likes to say." The next 2 hours turned into a real torture. Claudette was looking over my shoulder, commenting on every decision, questioning every number. Every comment she made was wrapped in fake concern. "Oh, honey, are you sure you should pay so much for organic food? The guests will hardly notice the difference. That design firm? I hear they always go over budget. Maybe we should look at alternatives." "A new reservation system? But the old one is perfectly functional, isn't it? It seems like such an unnecessary expense." By the end of the day, my tolerance was running out. Luckily, we had a meeting scheduled with a group of guests who had come to celebrate a 50th wedding anniversary. I quickly excused myself and left, leaving Claudette in the office. Meeting the Pearson family was a breath of fresh air. 8 people, an elderly couple, their children and grandchildren, had come for a week to celebrate their golden wedding. I personally greeted them in the lobby, introduced the staff who would be serving them during their stay, and escorted them to their specially decorated cottage. "Mrs. Mercer, this is just wonderful," said Mrs. Pearson, an elderly woman with kind eyes, when she saw the birthday cake and champagne waiting for them in the living room. "The Shore Harbor is proud to be a part of your special moments," I replied. "Please let me know if you need anything else." "Even the owner personally welcomes us." Mr. Pearson winked at his wife. On my way back to the main building, I noticed Claudette talking to someone on the restaurant's terrace. The man in the business suit looked familiar, and after a moment, I recognized him, Victor Ramirez, a representative of an investment group that had recently expressed interest in buying Berrigovaya Gavon. I declined their offer, explaining that I had no intention of selling, but they were persistent. What was Claudette doing with it? And why didn't she mention this meeting? I came closer, but they were already saying goodbye. Victor shook Claudette's hand and left, and she stayed on the terrace, enjoying the wine and the view of the ocean. "Did you have a good meeting?" I asked, approaching her table. Claudette flinched slightly, but quickly composed herself. "Yes, Just an old friend who happened to be here. It's a small world, you know. Victor Ramirez doesn't just happen to be anywhere, I said bluntly. Claudette took a sip of her wine before answering. Well, he contacted me and asked to meet. I saw no reason to refuse. After all, every opportunity has to be considered, right? What opportunity, Claudette? I sat down across from her. Ren, dear. She leaned forward, speaking in a tone that would be used to explain something to a child. You have to look at this from a practical point of view. Running a resort is a huge responsibility. You've barely been here 3 months, and you're already spending enormous amounts of money on renovations. What will happen in a year? In 5? I have a long-term vision for this place, I replied firmly. And the financial forecasts are positive. But you could get millions right now, she insisted. Open your own boutique hotel in the city, invest, secure the future. It's my legacy, Claudette. A legacy from a man who left you when you were a child, she sighed. I just don't want you to make emotional decisions that could damage your future. And Lyle's future. There was so much venom in her words, wrapped in feigned concern, that I could barely stop myself from saying something I would regret later. I appreciate your concern, I said, but the decision about Baragovaya Gavan is mine. The next few days turned into a real Cold War. Claudette continued to interfere with my work, showing up at staff meetings, questioning my decisions, making snide remarks behind my back. The staff started to get nervous, not knowing how to react to this strange dynamic. But what worried me the most was how Lyle reacted to the whole situation. He saw what was happening, but instead of openly taking my side, he tried to please both sides. During the day, he accompanied me to meetings and supported my initiatives, and in the evenings, he spent time with his mother, listening to her concerns. Sat. She just wants to help, Ren, he said one evening when we were finally alone. Her methods may seem intrusive, but her heart is in the right place. Really? I couldn't hide my sarcasm. She's just exploring options. Lyle rubbed his eyes under his glasses. You know, Mom, she's always considering every possible scenario. It's not her resort to explore options, I raised my voice, and it's not her decision. Of course it's not. Lyle tried to hug me, but I pulled away. Look, let's just get through this visit. She'll be gone in a few days, and everything will be back to normal. But I knew that nothing would be normal anymore. Something had fundamentally changed, not only in my relationship with Claudette, but also in my perception of Lyle. His inability to protect me, his constant excuses for his mother's behavior, all of this opened my eyes to weaknesses I had previously overlooked or ignored. The next day, I spent most of the morning with Silas discussing plans for the upcoming season. He became my trusted ally and mentor, patiently explaining the ins and outs of running a resort and sharing stories about his father. Harrison was a visionary, Silas said as we sat in his office. He saw the potential of Shore Harbor when everyone else saw only an abandoned property. And he wasn't afraid to go against tradition when he felt it was the right thing to do. How exactly? I asked, always eager to learn more about the man I barely knew. When we first started, everyone advised him to turn the resort into a standard chain hotel, to change the name, unify everything, make it a safe investment. But Harrison insisted on preserving the individuality of the place. He said, "Places with a soul cannot be stamped." I smiled, feeling a strange connection to my father through those words. That's what I want to preserve, I said, the soul of the Shore Harbor. And you're doing a great job. Silas looked at me warmly. The staff sees it. The guests feel it. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. His support gave me the strength I needed in the last few days. I returned to work with renewed energy, solving problems, communicating with guests, and directing staff. Even Claudette's critical remarks seemed less important. That evening, we had a special dinner planned for the Pearson family to celebrate their anniversary. I personally reviewed the menu with the chef, helped choose the wine, and even organized a little musical surprise. A local musician who played a song from their wedding. It was just magical. said the Pearson daughter, when I came to their table during dessert. My parents are thrilled. We're glad we could make this evening special, I replied sincerely. You know, we stayed here many years ago when my kids were little, Mr. Pearson said. But this time it's different. More personal. It's like the resort has a soul again. I couldn't help but smile as I heard Silas's words echo about my father. On my way back to the main building, I heard voices coming from the open window of the small living room. Claudette's voice was sharp, insistent. Lyle, you have to talk to her. She's wasting money on sentimental nonsense instead of focusing on real investments. This renovation, these special moments for guests, it all looks nice, but where's the profit? Mom, Wren knows what she's doing. Lyle's voice sounded tired. And the resort is doing well. Only because Harrison left it in good condition, Claudette cut him off. But what about in a year? She's emotionally attached to this place, to the idea of heritage, but it's a business, not a family heirloom. So what are you offering? Lyle asked. Ramirez made a very generous offer, Claudette replied. Well above market value. If Wren doesn't want to sell, maybe we should look at other options. What options? Lyle's voice became tense. Gerald has been talking to our lawyers. There may be a way to challenge the will. After all, it's strange that Harrison left everything to his daughter, whom he hadn't spoken to in decades. Perhaps he was not in his right mind or under someone's influence. I felt the blood drain from my face. Were they planning to challenge my father's will? To take Coastal Harbor away from me? And Lyle was a part of this? Mom, that sounds unethical, Lyle said after a pause. I don't think it's the right way to go. Then convince her to sell, Claudette insisted. It's in her best interest. You're her husband, Lyle. She should listen to your advice. I couldn't listen any longer. Quietly, I walked away from the window and went to my office, feeling my insides boiling with anger and pain. Claudette had always been manipulative, but this was crossing the line. And Lyle, even if he didn't agree with his mother, he was considering her offer, discussing my inheritance behind my back. I was sitting in the darkness of my office, looking out the window at the night ocean, when I heard a knock on the door. Wren? Lyle came in, turning on the light. Are you okay? I've been looking everywhere for you. I turned to him, trying to control my voice. I want you to leave, Lyle. What? He froze in mid-step. What are you talking about? I heard you talking to Claudette, I said, looking him in the eye. About convincing me to sell the resort. Lyle turned white. Wren, it's not what you think. I didn't agree with her. But you didn't say no outright either. I shook my head. You saw it as an option, Lyle. No, He ran a hand through his hair. I was trying to understand her point of view, but I wasn't going to do anything. What about convincing me to sell? I asked. I want you both to leave, I said firmly, tomorrow. Wren, please, let's talk about it. He took a step toward me. I love you. But you already have. I felt tears coming to my eyes, but I fought them back. You need time to decide whose side you're on, Lyle. Don't do this. His voice broke. We can compromise. Compromise? I laughed bitterly. Between what and what, Lyle? Between disinheriting me through the courts or forcing me to sell it? If you don't see the problem, then we have more problems than I thought. Please leave, I repeated. Not forever, just for now. I need space to figure things out, and you need space too. Lyle looked like he wanted to argue further, but then he just nodded. Okay. If that's what you want, I'll leave tomorrow. But this conversation isn't over, Wren. We have to find a way out. When he left, I was alone again in the darkness of the office. But this time, something was different. Despite the pain and disappointment, I felt strangely relieved, as if I had lifted a heavy burden that I didn't even realize I was carrying. For the first time, I took a clear stand, defending what was important to me without compromise. Baragovaya Gavan was my legacy, my chance to connect with the father I never knew, and create something of my own. And I'm not going to let anyone take that away from me, Not Claudette, not Ramirez, not even Lyle. The silence after Lyle and Claudette left seemed unbearable at first. The empty room, the absence of morning conversations at breakfast, everything reminded me of loneliness. But gradually, the silence turned into calm, and calm into clarity of thought. The next morning, I woke up with the first rays of the sun and went for a run on the beach. The ocean was calm, with only light waves touching the sand. When I returned, Silas was already waiting in the lobby with a cup of hot coffee. "I decided to start the day energetically," he said, handing me the cup. Harrison had a similar habit. Every time he faced a difficult decision, he would take a boat and go out to sea. "I've never been on a boat," I admitted. "Really?" "The daughter of Harrison Tanner, who loved the sea?" Silas looked surprised. "You know, we have some nice boats. If you want, I could show you the basics." That afternoon, Silas took me to a small bay where the resort kept its fleet. We went out to sea on an elegant white sailboat. Silas patiently explained the basics of steering, how to feel the wind, how to turn the boat. "You're a natural sailor," he said as we were returning. "You have the same quick reflexes as your father." "Tell me about him," I asked. Harrison was a complex man, incredibly smart, driven, and sometimes ruthless in business, but he was also the most loyal friend. And he never broke his word. "Why did he never contact me?" Silas took a deep breath. "When Harrison and your mother were getting a divorce, it was tense. Bethany made one condition. He would disappear from your life completely. No sudden appearances, no gifts, no letters." "And he agreed?" "He gave her his word. And Harrison has never broken his promises. I think at first he thought it was temporary, but as the years went by, it became more and more difficult to get in touch. He decided that stability was better for you than the chaos of a fickle presence. But he kept tabs on me? He had a whole folder in his office with your accomplishments, school awards, university articles, even photos from afar. He was proud of you, Wren. The pain of betrayal that I had carried all my life began to transform into the sad realization that my father had made a choice that he thought was right, even if it had hurt us both. I spent the next few days studying the history of Bear Hove Harbor. One morning, while looking through old photographs, I came across a picture of the resort's guests feasting on the beach, around a bonfire, with musicians playing guitars. "What is this event?" I asked Silas. "It's a traditional beach feast. Beregovaya Gavin used to be famous for them. We stopped doing them in the 90s when we became more of a luxury destination." "Why not revive the tradition?" I suggested. "Collaborate with local fishermen and farmers, local musicians, cooking classes right on the beach." I spent the next few days meeting with local producers. One of them, Elliot Palmer, owner of a small travel company called Ocean Adventures, was particularly interested in my ideas. "I've been thinking about partnering with Coastal Harbor for a long time," he said. Elliot was the opposite of a typical corporate partner, tanned, with sun-faded hair, wearing frayed shorts. But his eyes shone with passion as he talked about his tours. Scuba diving, visiting remote islands, whale watching. "We could create exclusive packages for your guests," he suggested. "Real adventures tailored to their interests." This fits perfectly with my vision. I felt I had found a like-minded person. Our collaboration grew into a friendship. Elliot knew everyone in the town, fishermen, farmers, musicians. Through him, I made contacts that were vital to my plans. The first beach banquet exceeded all expectations. The guests were delighted to be able to dine on the sand, under the stars, with the sound of the waves as their musical accompaniment. Soon, Beregovaya Gavin began to attract attention in the industry. One of the leading hospitality magazines called our resort Revival of the Classics. But our personal life remained difficult. Lyle called regularly, but our conversations were tense. "I want to apologize, Wren," he said. "Not just for that conversation with your mom, but for all the years I haven't protected you. What's changed?" "I found a file in your mother's office with documents from the lawyers challenging your father's will. She's already started the process without my knowledge." "She's really willing to go that far?" Yes. I made her stop it. I told her that if she continued, I would cut off all ties with her. She wasn't happy. I need time, Lyle, I said. I can't just forget everything. I understand. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that I can change. You can stay at the guest cottage. We can try. One step at a time. We found a new rhythm, but there was no complete trust. I was holding back, not sharing all my plans, afraid of another disappointment. Claudette did not give up. Even though she stopped trying to challenge the will, she found other ways to intervene through her contacts in the industry, through comments in conversations with Lyle. I heard your mother-in-law was talking to Rick Jenkins, Silas said. Rick was a big wine supplier to resorts. And what did she tell him? She hinted that Baragovia Harbor might change direction. She's not giving up, I sighed. She's afraid, Silas said. Afraid that you'll prove her wrong about you. Instead of letting it break me, I used that energy to work. The beach banquets became popular, the partnership with Elliot expanded our capabilities, and the renovation was on schedule. Baragovia Gavan was acquiring a new identity, a place with a soul, with a history, and I was with it. I was no longer just Lyle's wife or Harrison's daughter. I became Wren Mercer, the owner of Shore Harbor, a woman who knew her worth. 6 months. That's exactly how long it's been since that dinner that changed my life forever. 6 months of transformation, not only for Baragovia Gavin, but also for me. The morning of the 6-month anniversary of my official management of the resort was particularly bright. The sun glittered on the waves as if someone had scattered diamonds on the ocean's surface. I stood on the terrace of my office, breathing in the salty air, and couldn't help but smile as I looked out over the resort grounds. It's a beautiful morning for a celebration. Silas's voice broke me from my contemplation. Sometimes I can't believe we've accomplished so much in such a short time, I replied. It's not we, Wren, Silas smiled softly. It's you, your vision, your energy, your perseverance. Harrison would be so proud, he added quietly. You know, he always said that if you ever took over, you would make it better than he ever could. Over the months, thanks to Silas's stories, I've finally been able to piece together a more complete picture of my father, a complex, imperfect, but loving man in his own way. Today's the big day, Silas snapped me back to reality. As ready as I can be, I sighed, although I'm still not sure about the Mercers. Lyle had insisted on inviting his parents, arguing that it was time to heal wounds. I agreed, but still had my doubts. Over the course of 6 months, my relationship with Lyle went through a difficult time. We went to see a couples therapist. Dr. Kaminsky helped us work through a lot of things. My fear of trust, Lyle's reluctance to confront his mother, our shared tendency to avoid difficult conversations. We worked, sometimes successfully, sometimes with setbacks. But the biggest problem, Claudette, remained unresolved. Lyle became more openly defensive of me, but still avoided direct confrontation. In the meantime, Coastal Harbor had really blossomed. After the success of the beach banquets, we introduced a whole program of authentic experiences. The partnership with Elliot expanded into a joint ecotourism project. The reconstruction of the North Wing was completed on time. The new advertising campaign, Find Your Place by the Sea, was recognized in the industry. Several prestigious publications have written about the resort's revival. That is why today we organized a special event for the press and partners. Claudette and Gerald showed up at 7:30. As always, she looked flawless. Silver gray dress, pearl necklace, perfect hair. Wren, darling, she came to me with a tight smile. What a spectacular event you've organized. Thank you, Claudette, I nodded. What you've done with the resort is really impressive, Gerald said, shaking my hand. Our analysts say that the value of the resort has almost doubled in the last 6 months. During the tour, I noticed Claudette's expression change from reserved skepticism to reluctant recognition, especially when we met guests who thanked me for the best vacation of their lives. My speech was short, thanking the team, my partners, especially Silas and Elliot. I mentioned my father, expressing my hope that he would approve of the resort's new life. The dinner started with a special salad. It was then that Claudette broke the silence about my success. "I have to admit, Ren," she said, sipping her wine, "you've proven me wrong about some things." "Some things?" I asked again. "Of course," Claudette smiled tightly. "You've shown a remarkable talent for management. Of course, you're lucky that Harrison left you a stable business and a loyal staff, and the Mercer connections certainly helped. But you did not disappoint." "Thank you, Claudette." I forced a smile. "Your opinion means a lot to me. And the strangest thing is that I realized it was a lie. Her opinion no longer carried that much weight for me. I didn't need her approval. My success spoke for itself. When dessert was served, Claudette drew attention to herself again. "You know, Ren, I still think you could make a better profit if you sold the resort now. You could open your own little hotel in town, something more manageable." "Mom!" Lyle turned to her sharply. "We've already discussed this." "I'm just saying," Claudette replied. "After all, Ren is still young and might want to have children. Running a place this big and raising a family is very difficult." "No, Mom." Lyle's voice became firmer. "You're thinking that Shore Harbor doesn't fit your idea of what a Mercer wife should do. You still can't get over the fact that Ren is a successful businesswoman in her own right, not because of our family name." The table fell dead silent. Claudette looked stunned. "Lyle, that's not appropriate," she said. "I've always wanted the best for Ren." "No, Mom. You only wanted what you thought was best for her, according to your standards. You never tried to understand what Ren really wanted, and I'm sorry I let you do that for so long." "Gerald," Claudette turned to her husband, looking for support. But Gerald just shrugged. "The boy is right, Claudette. You've always been too controlling, and Ren has proven to be a great businesswoman." "Claudette," I spoke calmly but firmly, "I appreciate you coming here today, and I understand that you think you know what's best for me. But Baragovaya Gavin is my place. Here I have found not only a connection with the father I never knew, but also myself. I will not sell the resort, and I hope that one day you will be able to accept it, and me, for who I am." Claudette looked at me for a long time, and in her eyes I saw something new. Maybe not respect, but a certain recognition. After dinner, Lyle found me. "I'm sorry about that scene," he said, "but I couldn't keep quiet any longer." "Don't apologize," I took his hand. For both of us. We went out onto the terrace, looking out at the ocean. The moon was reflected in the waves, creating a silver path on the water. "Ren, I know there's still a lot of unresolved issues between us, and I know I've earned your distrust, but I want you to know that I'm on your side, completely and irrevocably." I looked at him, at the man I loved, with whom I had gone through so many trials. Our marriage may never have been perfect, but it was real. "I know," I said, squeezing his hand, "and I think we can get through this. Together." Later that night, I stayed in the small dining room, the same place where I had had my fateful dinner with Claudette 6 months earlier. Silas found me there. "A successful evening," he said, sitting down across from me. "Who would have thought we'd come this far in 6 months?" "I did," he winked. "And your father, too." "I guess you both saw something in me that I didn't see myself." "Sometimes we need other people to show us our true capabilities," Silas shrugged. "But when we finally see them for ourselves, that's the real high wave that carries us forward." I nodded, feeling something inside me finally fall into place. I was no longer the insecure young woman who was constantly looking for approval. I was Ren Mercer, owner of Shore Harbor, daughter of Harrison Tanner, wife of Lyle. But above all, I was me. The next morning, we hosted a family breakfast on the same terrace where Claudette had once humiliated me. But this time, it was different. I was sitting at the head of the table, confidently leading the conversation, feeling my rightful place in this space, in this life. Claudette was unusually quiet, but not hostile. Lyle sat next to me, his presence firm and supportive. Silas and Elliot were talking animatedly about new plans for the resort. The sun was rising over the ocean, promising another beautiful day. And I knew that whatever wave came next, I was ready to meet it.